I'd want to change the assumption that there are women's roles or women's spaces or women's issues, but I also think it's more insidious, it's more ingrained than that. So I'd want to change the assumption that there even are assumptions about women.
I have a few. So first, I think there are several assumptions, I think, based on how you look, that assume your capability. So for example, I was doing outreach today, and I had several students assume that I was a fashion designer or an artist or a teacher or a hairstylist, but none of them assumed that I was a scientist, because I'm a young woman, and I would like it to be more common that women can do anything.
A big assumption about women that I would like to change is that they can't get into particular job roles. So for example, I know it's really hard for women to get into the tech industry, and a variety of other industries that are quite male dominated. So that is definitely an assumption I'd like to change about women.
The one assumption I would like to change is the assumptions that women put on women, the assumptions that we put on ourselves, that we perhaps need to be the perfect daughter, the perfect mother, the perfect partner before we're allowed to be the perfect scientist. And actually that compounding of expectations and idealised self that we, and the pressure that puts you under on multiple different ways is unrealistic, unobtainable, and not something that we wouldn't put on colleagues, for example. So the assumptions that we put on ourselves are the things I think that we have to change.
So assumptions about women that I'd like to change is that we can only be one thing. You can be anything that you choose to be, plus more or less. So you don't only have to be a tomboy, you don't only have to wear dresses, you don't only have to be academic, you can do everything. And I think there's no point putting women in a box because we're breaking out of them now.
Assumptions I'd like to challenge are around behaviours, qualifications and skills of women. In contexts where, in theory, gender equality is possible, we sometimes hear things like there just weren't enough qualified women for the job, or there weren't enough women who were ambitious enough to step up, or there were women who couldn't handle the pressure or didn't want to work the hours. Such views are mainly male-dominated views, and the problem isn't the women who don't have the skills or the qualification. What we need to challenge is the worldviews, the views of there's only one particular way in which you can do a job or be successful. What we need is more genuine diversity, so an idea that it is possible for everyone to play to their strengths.
Yes. The assumption about women that I would like to change is that of a female as Mother Earth. Being caring and nurturing are important attributes, but they should not only be female attributes. Being assertive, being competitive, being ambitious are used mainly to describe men, and they get a negative connotation when they're used to describe women, and that is an assumption I would like to change. Also, assumptions about how we dress as females, how we present ourselves in the workplace are still very strong, and they still dictate to a large extent the decisions we make about what to wear and how to present ourselves.
Yeah, I think one of the assumptions would be around leadership, as traditionally we see more male than female leadership in this area. So does it mean that men have better capacity and potential to be leaders, or are women actually receiving the appropriate opportunities and tailored support to be leaders in the area?
There are loads of assumptions about women I'd like to change. From my own research, I have done projects looking at women in very technical occupations, engineers, scientists, and I would very much like to challenge the assumption that those are not professions for women, as obviously we have some incredibly skilled, competent technical women who can do very well in those areas. I'd also like to challenge the idea that women aren't born leaders, that they don't have leadership skills. Some of the most effective leaders I've worked with and known are women, including, I might say, the Dean of the Business School, Cathy Cassell. Other assumptions I'd like to challenge include perhaps a bit more judgment about what women shouldn't be. So we often sort of judge women very harshly if they seem to be ambitious or confident. There's a sort of assumption that means they're not going to be nice women, and I would very much like to challenge that. And then finally, it seems quite appropriate today, having been at the Fathers in the Workplace launch, I think we could challenge the idea that women aren't reliable, that they're not committed to their work. What we've heard about today is how, in the past, the majority of childcare responsibilities or elder care responsibilities have fallen on women. I think it's really, really great that we're starting to see a change and that's being more equally shared, and we will hopefully see organisations becoming a lot more equal places.
One of them, it's one of the things that I hear the most and that's really annoying, is the fact that women are not supportive of each other. And it's simply not true. I've been working in different places, different countries, and women are really supportive of each other. The other ones is stuff that we hear like really too often also, that we cannot be good leader, for instance, because our nature is nurturing, so we cannot take the hard decision, or that our leadership skills are too different to be effective and stuff like this. Or also that we don't perform well under pressure, that we're too emotive, we're gonna cry, blah 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 blah. So we hear a lot of those like gender-based assumptions that are just not helping.
I think one of the biggest assumptions is around women's ability to combine work and family life, particularly when you have a job which entails spending a significant amount of time away from home. And also the practical implications of those gender assumptions and how they are manifested in the work environment, such as recruitment, promotion and other career development opportunities. I think that sometimes we're less aware of biases or assumptions that might not necessarily affect us, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. We have made significant progress in ensuring equal access to senior leadership role and other career development opportunities for women. However, it's important that we're not complacent. And striving for parity, especially when it comes to equal pay, should not just be seen as a vision, but requires real-world action.
I think this is a great question. We've made enormous progress over the past 100 years in terms of women's accessibility and having women in prominent positions in all walks of life. So I think one of the biggest challenges will be to keep momentum going in terms of that area, keep making progress. But I also think there's a challenge in terms of intersectionality, making sure to think about the different range of experiences and not think about women as one group.
So I would like to change the assumptions that depending on what you look at, you're capable of different things. So I was at an outreach event today where a number of students assumed that I was a teacher or a hairstylist or a cleaner or an artist, and none of them thought that I could be a scientist because I'm a young woman and I'm wearing nice clothes. And I would like to change the assumption that women can be anything. It doesn't matter what you look like, and yeah.
So I think some new challenges that women will face in generations to follow are more assumptions and stereotypes being made about them, and they'll have to prove themselves even further. So yeah, I think there's still a long way for women to go, and I feel like they still have a lot to prove.
The biggest challenge is these assumptions that I've just talked about, the assumptions that we have to be the perfect daughter, mother, partner before we can be the perfect scientist, is only getting worse and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I think that really sort of like core reading for all women of every generation and men should be things like The Beauty Myth, Heather Widow's work around the perfect me, and this concept of the good enough parent and the good enough mother from Winnicott back in the back in the 1960s and 1970s. We really understand that we need to be just good enough in all aspects of our lives, including a scientist that tries and fails and fails and tries again. To achieve what we need to achieve in the future. So that's a message that I would, and the reading that I would pass on to future generations.
So what I believe is the most important thing for the generation before me and the one to come is that we should just keep remembering. We need to remember all of the influential women who have come before us and have put their say into feminist history. We can't forget Mary Daly, we can't forget Eartha Kitt, because the problems that we see in history today keep repeating itself. And through looking at the literature, we can see all of the answers that we've ever needed. So yeah, I think it's very important to remember.
One challenge for the next generation of women is to actively change the discourse that enables bias. The way we speak about women matters. The stories we tell about successful, clever, powerful women are important. And equally, the stories we tell about weak women, women who just don't cut it, women who are a bit flaky, women who are shallow or scheming, they do have an effect. So it matters what language we use. The stories in the media, the stories in films and in novels, the stories we tell our colleagues in the corridor, they all contribute to the discourse. So it's really important that we challenge ourselves to use positive language, to find stories of successful women and to actually amplify positive and supportive voices.
I believe that the biggest challenge that the next generation of women will have is to keep on raising their voices, make noises, and fight for gender equality issues. We've made a lot of progress, but the problem is not solved. Still, women are getting paid less than men for doing exactly the same jobs. We still don't have good enough representation of women in senior management roles. And still women assume more household duties than men do. I think having more females as role models will help a lot the next generation, but I also think female networks will be particularly important for the next generation to support women raising their voices and making changes.
I think one of the challenges is to also think about the outcomes of our research in science and technology. So as women doing this research in the area, we need to think about whether our outcomes of the research are delivering benefits to the women as well as men in local communities. So for example, in terms of energy, once we have all the technologies to provide more affordable and cleaner energy to the local community, are they benefiting women as well as men because of their different roles in real life? For example, like when we provide more electricity to the school for their lighting and the laboratories, are they benefiting the girls as well as boys, or is it being affected by a traditional gender-based inequality education system? So we need to think about unintended consequences from our research from the beginning as well.
The biggest challenge for the woman after me would be to keep the fight, because there's country where women can still not go to school or study science, but even in developing country, it gets a bit harder because there's a lot of assumption that, we achieve equity, we achieve gender balance and things like this, when it's simply not true. If you look at the number, there's still like pay gap in most workplaces. So because of those assumptions, it makes the battle a little bit harder. So I think they will have to fight a little bit, like to explain a little bit more what's going on and why we still need to keep going on. And also when you see in Western country that there's political decisions that are being made that directly affect the health of women and the reproductive right without consulting any woman, that's a bit scary. But I think now it's going a little bit backtrack and they will have to fight for those rights again.